Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It's Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Looks like the jury has reached verdict for the 3 former Memphis police officers charged with violating Tyree Nichols' federal civil rights in a 2023 fatal beating that sparked national protests and calls for broad changes in policing. After a nearly month-long trial, jurors have informed the judge today, as we speak, that they have agreed on verdicts in the case against Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. The parties and attorneys were reconvening, and the reveal, we're waiting on that live. We'll have that news for you as soon as we get it. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris will be speaking shortly in Ripon, Wisconsin, the birthplace of the GOP. She'll be with an interesting partner today. That will be, of course, Liz Cheney. We'll have that for you live shortly. That orange criminal will not leave the legal Haitian migrants alone. He's vowed to deport them all. You asked your friend Rudy Giuliani about that, friend. Ask what the Haitians in Brooklyn did to him after he had his police force beat up Patrick Dorismond. A judge sentenced a former Colorado County clerk to 9 years for the 2020 voting data scheme. Florida's Yes on 4, the amendment that will allow first and second trimester abortions or even later to protect the health of patients, is on November's ballot. We'll talk to one advocate about their push to get the 60% needed to approve the constitutional amendment. We'll also talk to a chief equity officer about how Project 2025 will affect your job. As you may be aware, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We'll talk to Maryland State Attorney about how they are handling the spikes in family violence in Prince George's County. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time, and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's Uncle Roro, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now.
According to the latest Marquette University poll, Vice President Kamala Harris maintains a tight 4-point edge over Donald Trump in Wisconsin. We're waiting as we speak for the Vice President to speak soon in Ripon, Connecticut. We're going to go to our panel as we're waiting for the Tyree Nichols verdict. It's coming in as we speak. But before we go any further, we'll have a little commentary here on what we expect the current Vice President to say in Wisconsin. We're joined with our Thursday night panel, Kwame Jackson, who is a political strategist coming to us out of the City of Angels, Los Angeles, and Attorney Jade E. Mathis, Jade E. Mathis Esquire, a regular guest who is counsel in District Legal Group here in Washington, D.C. Jay, let's start with you. What are you expecting? Is this an unusual development, or what's going on here with this unusual partnership about to be debuted in Wisconsin?
I think it is an unusual one, but it is one to finally, I guess, remind people and the people who aren't aware of it that the Republican Party is even tired, right? They're even tired of Trump's charades and shenanigans. And I think by former Representative Cheney and her father backing Vice President Kamala Harris, I think they're taking a stance, right? And I hope this is a stance that their party follows, that the Republican Party will follow.
Yeah, I do too. Although it sends a little chill down my spine to think of Dick Cheney as somebody who's on the side of the Angels, particularly given all the death and destruction they've caused in the world. I don't know, Kwame, if you're in the ear of the Democratic Party and the Vice President, I mean, strategically, how are you looking at this move?
I think at this point, we have to take all allies as they come. Obviously, I am not a Dick Cheney fan. He has the moniker of Darth Vader for a reason. And, you know, he led the dark arts in the Bush White House. But to have him come aboard, to have his daughter, Liz Cheney, come aboard, to have others of the Republican ilk come aboard, particularly those who have served in the Trump White House, who can speak directly to working with him and to say that he's unfit, to say that he's not really ready to meet the challenge of a second term or a second election, and to make sure America knows why. I think it's important to have those voices in the room. I think it goes back to the quote from the DNC. I was there in Chicago, and the congressman who stared from the Trump White House that, you know, you're not a Democrat because you vote for Trump, you're a patriot. And so I think that's the Republican view that they can always think of and they can kind of hold close to and still come be part of this larger tent party.
That's interesting that you frame it that way clearly, and that they're framing it that way. This discussion and this debate over patriotism, and for the Democrats to do this at this juncture is very interesting, to kind of try to seize that. Jay, you know, this hasn't been well contested ground for quite some time. People who are traditionally Rust Belt Democrats have been migrating to the Republican Party for quite some time, voting against their class interests. We see what's going on with the longshore people and the strike on the East Coast and in the Gulf states. You know, this question of patriotism that Kwame raises, and this struggle to define what it means to put country over party, is there some possible ground that the Vice President can gain with the patriotism message? And how does today's event maybe help, as Kwame has kind of laid out there, advance this narrative that the Democrats seem to be relaxing into after, who knows, maybe 2 generations?
I absolutely some ground. And one thing that I particularly admire is that I think this is showing that Kamala Harris is a person who is able to forgive people and even work with someone who may not be an ally, right? So that she's open-minded, she's progressive, as that is one of her running, you know, her running slogans is that she's progressive, and one of the grounds that she runs on. And I think this is exemplary and personified, like showing her character, her party's character, and showing that, hey, we don't have to agree on everything. However, we can still be civil and work together. And I think that's a great representation of how she would be as a president as well.
Well, I tell you, can
I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. Please, Kwame, by all means. Yes, sir.
What was interesting, I was on the floor at the DNC in Chicago, and I remember 3 particular words in the word cloud, right? In terms of how to rebrand and think about the new Democratic Party. And one that you heard over and over again was patriotism, the use and the reclamation of that word so that Democrats could find the high ground with patriotism as part of their word cloud, as part of their brand. The other one was USA chants. You know, black folk get a little iffy about these USA chants. You know, USA, USA. It gets a little Trumpy in that regard. But they really were trying to reclaim that USA chant, that ground, in terms of echoing patriotism. So that's two. And then the third one was freedom. And the freedom piece is not just the freedom to be away from something, but the freedom to do something, right? So you get freedom from, you know, government leaning into your reproductive rights. You get freedom from government dictating, you know, the book bans that you should read or what you should be teaching your kids. But you also get the freedom to just be you. Like they said, love who you want to love, be who you want to be, and then just freedom to exist in this society, right? With gun violence in our schools, freedom for kids to go to school without the fear of gun violence. So I think those three words, freedom, USA, 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 and patriotism, have been reclaimed by the Democrats. And you see that as part of their word cloud brand.
You know, that's interesting, Kwame. Let's widen the circle a little bit, if that's all right. Certainly, we see that the killers of the Israeli military have expanded their strikes. They just hit South Lebanon, just south of Lebanon, a little while ago. It's after midnight over there. Of course, they again striking in Gaza. It's not a surprise, although it is October. But we're within a week of the October 7th attack, of course, by Hamas in Israel. But this response, well, we saw the President of the United States yesterday with the Group of Seven saying that they want renewed sanctions on Iran for Iran hitting Israel. But nobody's talking about stopping arms from Israel. We saw what happened to the Vice President about a month ago in Michigan. When folks were protesting. We saw it again in Arizona, where she kind of had crafted a response that kind of kept this thing in a valence of sorts. She can't break, obviously, break with the president or U.S. formal policy. How do you see this increasing war, this regional war, really, because Israel has by this time invaded yet another country on its list? How is this regional war playing out? I mean, might there be some protesters there today? We know Wisconsin is a diverse state, the college town of Madison. Then you've got, of course, as you say, Milwaukee with all those black folk who might be chanting USA, but may be a little uneasy about this. And then, of course, right to the east, you have Michigan with that heavy Muslim population. How would you advise the Vice President to try to craft this message as Israel seems determined to put its thumb on the scale to help elect Donald Trump?
Yep. Is that for me?
Yeah, please. Yeah, and then I'll ask you.
Yeah, so to start that, I mean, I love that we're having this discussion because obviously it's probably the biggest piece of the pie right now leaning into the election as really this whole international pot continues to boil over. I think the vice president is in a very precarious position. She has to thread a very surgical needle between keeping support from Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, the folks in Dearborn in Michigan, a key swing state, that large Arab population, and then also obviously support of our longtime ally Israel, as well as domestic Jewish populations and voters. And so she has to thread that needle, and it's very difficult because obviously we're not going to let Israel just hang in the wind and, you know, defend themselves. But at the same time, I was speaking with a friend of mine and I said, you know, this is an analogy of someone at school, right? You're a kid at school and you go and you decide, I'm going to fight the bully. I'm Israel. I'm going to fight the bully. So I go and I punch the bully in the mouth, which is Iran. And as soon as I punch the bully in the mouth, I go run to my big brother, which is the USA, and say, hey, now we're ready for the fight. So it's like you're dragging people into something that is going to be a much bigger quagmire, could be a regional destabilization. 30% of the oil that flows through the entire world flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which is the strait right next to Iran. They could shut that down and create an economic calamity. So there are so many ways that these things can have ramifications that could spill over that would actually tilt the election. So Vice President Harris is in a very precarious position. She has to thread that needle. She has to show support for, you know, a peace plan, for a two-state solution, but at the same time, push for the fact that, you know, Israel needs to pull back from the ledge. It needs to calm down. It doesn't need to have a mega retaliation versus Iran, because that's going to put us in a situation where we will get dragged in regardless.
Yeah, I don't think the Donald Trump of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, has any intention on pulling back. He's trying to stay out of jail. And when you start talking about ethno-nationalism, all bets are off, so you know. Yep. Jade, any thoughts on this?
You actually summed it up perfectly, exactly what I was thinking. The only thing that I would add to that is from a Michigan native and a Detroit native right outside of Dearborn, who has the largest population, as you said, of Middle Easterns in the United States of America. That is really going to be, because some of the Muslims in Dearborn are a little more extreme than other Muslims are, but they are very, they're very culturally, prideful, and I love that. They have always been great contributors to the industry of Michigan as far as the economy, the businesses, the gas stations. A lot of them are self-owned, the stores there. So I think that is really going to make a big difference, and she's going to have to tread very, very lightly in that aspect. It would be that being that Michigan is a swing state.
Jay, this is the art of diplomacy. This is diplomacy at work. Like, how do you do something in such a fluid way? How do you dance? And this is where it's more of a art than it is a science. And so this will really show Vice President Harris's international chops, her ability to embrace diplomacy and start to do that dance very gently, because, this is not going to require a heavy fist action on our part.
Indeed, and we'll pick this up after the break. Jade, I might want to ask you about those people in the Nation of Islam, because we know that's Temple number 1 in Detroit, and a lot of black Muslims in Detroit. So I'm going to ask about that kind of, because I don't think that's ever been discussed anywhere. We need to talk about that. But we will be back shortly. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, and we'll be back in a moment after break.
He told us who he was.
Should abortion be punished? There has to be some form of punishment.
Then he showed us.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it.
Now Donald Trump wants to go further with plans to restrict birth control, ban abortion nationwide, even monitor women's pregnancies. We know who Donald Trump is. He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris. I get it. The cost of rent, groceries, and utilities is too high. So here's what we're going to do about it. We will lower housing costs by building more homes and crack down on landlords who are charging too much. We will lower your food and grocery bills by going after price gougers who are keeping the cost of everyday goods too high. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message because you work hard for your paycheck. You should get to keep more of it. As president, I'll make that my top priority.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Kamala Harris has never backed down from a challenge. She put cartel members and drug traffickers behind bars, and she will secure our border. Here's her plan. Hire thousands more border agents, enforce the law, and step up technology. and stop fentanyl smuggling and human trafficking. We need a leader with a real plan to fix the border, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. I'm sitting in the chair for our big brother Roland Martin, Greg Carr, and we're going to continue our discussion. We're waiting while we wait for the vice president to take the stage in Wisconsin. At the same time, I think we're also waiting on the verdict in the Tyree Nichols case. We might be joined in a moment by the man himself, Roland Martin. We'll have some breaking news, and as soon as we get that verdict, we will communicate it with you. Jay, before we left, oh, wait, okay, here we go. We got our brother hooked up, live from Montgomery, Alabama, Roland Martin. All right, so we're still working out the tech there. You know, Roland traveled. Shout out to the Alabama State Hornets, Hornet Nation. If you did not see Roland's speech from earlier today on the campus of Alabama State University, my mama's home state of Alabama, please go back and check out Black Star Network to watch that speech. We'll have him in a moment. He's still there. So again, we're waiting on the verdict here in the Tyree Nichols case, and the vice president will be taking the stage with Liz Cheney in a moment. Jade, while we have a second, I want to ask you, as we said before the break, you know, I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about the significant Muslim population in Detroit and in Michigan that is black Muslims, going back to the Ahmadiyya movement of the early 20th century. Of course, we know that's Mecca, temple #1 in the Nation of Islam. How should we be thinking about Islam differently if we're talking about Michigan? And could this have some impact in that black Muslim population? Oh, can't hear you.
Unfortunately, we're still one of the most still one of the most segregated cities in the country, right? So you have the Dearborn Muslims, which are generally Chaldean, Persian, Pakistani, and of that sort. And then you have the black Muslims, obviously, which the birthplace of the Nation of Islam was Detroit. So one thing is that they have for the past, I would say, 40 years, they've remained pretty separate. However, I would say most recently with the younger Nation of Islam Muslims coming forward, I think they have been collaborating a lot more on what they can do in Detroit and what they are doing, what they're going to work on in the city of Detroit. So I do think that is an opportunity for an ear there for them to collaborate on that, because I have heard them, discussing and at political events, and they backed each other for those events. So I do think that there's an opportunity there. I just really hope that they seize that opportunity and they take that opportunity. Because as I said, a lot of the Muslim temples in Detroit are more in the inner city areas, whereas in Dearborn, it's more in the Middle Eastern areas. So there's disparity there as well, especially when it comes to, police and law enforcement and those type of things, with the black Muslims probably feeling comfortable crossing over into Dearborn.
It's interesting, Kwame, as Jade was walking us through that geography, it's interesting, and think about it. Of course, Rashida Tlaib, who the white press and commercial press will identify with the non-black Muslims, she's in John Conyers' seat, which means there's a lot of black people in her district. I remember being in Detroit about 4 or 5 years ago, just before John Conyers made transition for a reparations conference, and both John Conyers and Rashida Tlaib were at the conference speaking with the people. And people look at her and think, okay, she's with the Palestinians, but no, there's a lot of black people pulled the liver for Tlaib. She's in John Conyers' district. Today, even as we're here right now, Ta-Nehisi Coates, whose book, The Message, just dropped on the 1st of October. He's actually speaking at Howard University at Crampton Auditorium. A lot of young black folk in particular are really grappling with this question of Palestine. The 3rd chapter in his small book, after he spends time in Gorée in Senegal, and then in South Carolina, where his book was, they attempted to ban his book, as we were talking earlier about book banning in the schools. He then goes to Palestine, and he's in Gaza, and he's saying, you know, I'm here, well, West Bank, not Gaza, and he's saying, this is like Jim Crow. This is like apartheid that my parents and their generation. So Kwame, at this moment, with a month to go before this election and early voting has already started, do we need to be paying attention, particularly, as Jade said, some of these younger folk around this question of U.S. foreign policy, and could the vice president be damaged by solidarity politics that might be emerging from some unexpected places?
You know, Jade made a great point. She actually schooled me. I did not know that the birthplace of the Black Muslim movement was Detroit. So that's great information for me. So I want to thank you for that. And then number 2, the fact that, you know, the Muslim population is diverse. I mean, you have Sunni versus Shia, which is one of the fundamental divides between the Saudi Arabian Sunni population, 85% of all Muslims worldwide, and 15%, which are Shia, which is the Iran-backed faction within the Muslim delegation. And so what happens is there are so many kind of pockets and fissure points within the Muslim community that we have to be really wary of how we try to put them all in box. I also was not aware that Rashida Tlaib sat in John Conyers' seat. You know, shout out to John Conyers, my Kappa man, and all his great service and what he did in the government. Yes, and I had to do that for Roland. But I did not know that she sat in his seat. So she also has to thread the needle carefully between the Black Muslim population and the Black supporters of her seat, as well as the Palestinian supporters from her own ethnicity. So it's like, it's a very delicate balance as we look all around, but we do know that the fundamental issue that possibly will swing Michigan, besides the economy, besides inflation, is going to be what happens in the Middle East and how we respond, especially in the next, I'd call it 2 weeks. Depending on what happens with the force of the Israeli strike, whether it's more nuanced, whether it's more scaled, then whether it's, you know, just a blunt object, it's really going to determine how Michigan goes within that overall election point. So we're at a very, very precarious time. And like we said, we have to tread lightly and be wise. No question. I mean, there's times like this, we're fortunate we had the Black Star Network so we can have you all on to really get and de-layer this conversation, because clearly, talk about sledgehammer, CNN, MSNBC, the major networks, they're not going to cover it with this kind of layered subtlety. And when things do to make a turn, they have no way of explaining it. So I'm glad y'all are here. I'm hearing that we're going to toss to our brother Roland Martin. Is that right? Do we have him up now? If so, you all let me know. Okay, very good. So let's continue then. We're going to go. Should we take a break now, or should we move forward? I think. Okay. All right. We're going to keep going then. We're going to move to another population in the non-white world that is receiving a lot of attention here in the United States. It's a little place called Springfield, Ohio, and folks talking about dogs and cats. Trump is promising to revoke the legal immigration status of Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. And we certainly heard the candidate for vice president among the Republicans say, I don't care whether they're legal or not, I'm going to call them all illegal, which means who they are is illegal. I wonder if that includes your wife. Donald Trump said he's going to deport all of these folk back to Haiti if he returns to the White House. Listen to what the former president said during an interview with News Nation reporter Ali Bradley.
Now, these individuals in Ohio, these migrants from Haiti, these people living there from Haiti, do you consider them here legal or illegal? And would you revoke TPS status?
Which area are you talking about?
Springfield?
In Springfield, what's happening there is horrible. You have a beautiful community, 52,000 people, and about 30,000 people were put into that community rapidly, and the community is so nice, and they want to be so politically correct. You have to remove the people. You cannot destroy, we cannot destroy our country. You had a beautiful, safe community. Everyone's in love with everybody. Everything was nice. It was like a picture community. And all of a sudden, in a short period of time, they have 32,000 more people in there. It doesn't work. It can't work. It has nothing to do with Haiti or anything else. It doesn't work. You have to remove the people, and you have to bring them back to their own country. They are, in my opinion, it's not legal. It's not legal for anybody to do. It's not even on a human basis. It's not acceptable to the people that are there, and certainly to the people that are in Springfield.
Okay, we'll come back to Donald Trump in a moment. Meanwhile, live from Montgomery, Alabama, Roland Martin.
All right, Greg, I think you actually have tossed to me. Just want to make sure we're straight. Want to make sure you guys are getting my audio. Kara, okay, good. All right, cool. All right, so Greg, let me walk you through this here. First of all, crazy busy news day. Shortly, Vice President Kamala Harris will be speaking in Wisconsin with former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. We're going to be carrying that live, but let's talk about the Tyre Nichols case. The 3 cops who were on trial for the vicious beating death of Tyre Nichols. A mixed verdict coming out of Memphis. For Tadarius Bean, Count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law, excessive force and failure to intervene. He was found not guilty. The lesser involving bodily injury, also found not guilty. Count 2, deprivation of rights under color of the law, deliberate indifference, and the lesser involving bodily injury, found not guilty. But he also found not guilty on count 3, conspiracy to witness tamper. But Tadarius Bean found guilty on count 4, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. Demetrius Haley, count 1, not guilty. Deprivation of rights under color of the law, excessive force and failure to intervene. Lesser involving bodily injury, guilty. Count 2, not guilty. Lesser involving bodily injury, found guilty. Count 3, guilty. Count 4, guilty. Justin Smith, count 1, which was the deprivation of rights under the color of law, he was found not guilty. Count 2, not guilty. Count 3, not guilty. Count 4, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, he was found guilty. Now remember, 3 other officers actually pled guilty. These 3 chose to go to trial, and so a mixed verdict from the Department of Justice, where they were found not guilty on several charges. But again, all 3 officers who did go to trial in this case have been found guilty on at least 1 charge. They've been taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals, and the judges set their sentencing for January 22nd. Of course, this case has gotten lots of attention all across the country, because when that video was released, it just spurred all sorts of anger. And I'll tell you, I remember we were live, and when that video dropped, that was actually the most live viewers we've ever had watch this show. When that video dropped at 7 p.m., and then the next 30 minutes, our numbers went up almost up to 30,000 people watching live at one time. And so lots of attention surrounding this case. And so the question is, will the feds choose to retry on the other charges? Not sure. We'll hear from the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice on that. But as I said earlier, 3 former Memphis police officers who did plead guilty. Then you have, and some of them testified in this trial. Then you have these 3 officers who chose to go to trial, and every single one of these officers have been found guilty on at least 1 particular charge. And so we will, of course, will be waiting to hear from the family of Tyre Nichols. The attorney is Ben Crump, and so I'm sure they'll be speaking once they leave the courtroom. And so we will try to have that for you. And again, of course, the vice president will be speaking live, so we're carrying that as well. So quite the busy news day. So Greg, I'm going to toss it back to you as I leave Montgomery. Spoke to Alabama State, to the students here for their homecoming and about voting, and then heading out to catch a flight back to D.C. And so back to you, the Black Star Network.
Okay. Thank you, brother. Again, Roland Martin breaking the news of at least a mixed verdict coming out of Memphis. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith, 3 police officers among the group charged with the killing of Tyre Nichols. So we're going to, wait, I'm sorry, I'm getting the message in now. Okay, very good. Very good. So let's get some. I know this is real time in terms of reaction, but Jade, any thoughts on what we're hearing now out of Memphis?
As a former prosecutor and a current civil rights attorney, This honestly almost brought me to tears. While Roland was talking, I had to fight back the tears. And this is a prime example of that, the jury. You know, the jury makes the final determination. It doesn't mean that it's right all the time and it's an educated one and that there's a fair and neutral jury. So when that happens, it's just so disheartening. Even after watching the tape, and I'm sure they've been shown the tape and heard all the facts, they still decided this. And what's really disturbing to me is that they were found guilty of the lesser offenses, you know, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. I can't imagine that it would be, I don't know if they're going to serve any jail time for those. And if they do, it's probably going to be very, very minimal jail time for those convictions. Also, I'm hoping that the DOJ continues the civil rights investigation into this, because I think that's the only way the family is going to have any type of true justice, is if they consider their investigation into this and they are able to sway the decision based on that and hold those officers accountable.
Thank you, Jade, and thank you for that particular insight, given your experience. We're going to go back now to Memphis because the family of Tyree Wright is speaking. So let's go live to Memphis and hear what the family has to say.
Our family, I think the federal government, they really worked very hard for Tyree. And I'd like to thank God for watching over us and for our families. And, you know, like they said, they're all in prison. They're not getting out anytime soon, and it's not over. I'd just like to say, you know, let this be a message to all officers, you know, that, you know, you will reap what you sow. That's right. You know, I mean, you just can't go around hurting people and think that you're not going to be accountable for it. So let this be a message, because Tyree's death did not go in vain. That's right.
Now you hear from his sister, Kiwana. Kiana.
I just want to say, I don't know if I'm happy, but it's a bittersweet day. I'll never get my little brother back. But to see those officers held accountable for what they did, put our family through, big gift. Some hope for the future. Maybe this won't ever happen to another family in the future, but I just so thankful. I was smiling when I saw them get taken away because that's just one of the things that they did. What they did to my brother was wrong, and to see them go into custody and be held accountable was anything and everything that my family could ask for.
Justice for Tyree Nichols.
Justice for Tyree Nichols.
We'd like to thank all the activists, all the state representatives, everybody, all the faith-based community, everybody who stood for justice to say that Tyree deserved humanity, Tyree deserved his constitutional rights, and Tyree deserved to get home to his mother and father. Ms. Ripon, would you like to say the last word?
I just want to say to all of you guys, thank you so much for covering the story the correct way, and I appreciate the love and everything that you guys have given our family, and to the community of Memphis, thank you for all the prayers and all the love. Just thank you so much. We appreciate it all.
Anything else, Corinne? Anything else, family? No. Justice for Tyree Nichols.
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 Jade, I think we echo your hope that the federal government will be involved. We heard there Ben Crump, who Al Sharpton, I think today is Reverend Sharpton's birthday actually, who Al Sharpton has called Black America's Attorney General. That's the outside approach, one approach, but the person from the inside who probably deserves that name as much as anybody in the country, Kristen Clark, who is actually the Attorney General for Civil Rights. Let's hope Kristen Clark gets involved in this, in fact, because we know that those officers were acquitted of the most serious charge, as you say, violating Mr. Nichols' civil rights by causing his death. So, you know, federal witness tampering, yeah, it's something, but as you just walked us through, it ain't what we wanted. And so I'm sure you faced many of those juries over the years, and you know how unpredictable they can be. Kwame, any thoughts on what we are seeing right now and this verdict in the wake of it? Any thoughts about what we're seeing in real time tonight?
I'm going to echo Jade, and I'm going to say that this breaks my heart. This is a repetitive course, and I want to share some names from that repetitive course. Rodney King. Rodney King, when I was a high school senior, I spoke out as part of the Charlotte Observer and my Charlotte High School about Rodney King and what it meant to me as a young 16, 17-year-old man. Eric Garner. Eric Garner. I was a New Yorker when that happened. I met Eric Garner's mother. It started the I Can't Breathe movement. And then finally, George Floyd. George Floyd, we all know what that meant to the world, the beginning of a much broader global Black Lives Matter movement. But I think about that term, I think about Black Lives Matter, and I'm asking myself, how many sacrificial lambs will it take for our lives to matter, for our lives to be equal? And here we are with Tyree Nichols, once again, someone else who's been brought to the altar, been sacrificed, unfortunately, this time at the hands of African-American officers, which also breaks my heart. And it makes me say that even though they were African-American officers, they still saw him in that same light. We always talked about, this is a racial lens for people to see people and say, okay, they're going to be equal in my humanity because I'm Black or because I'm white or because of community policing and having faces in your community that look like you and understand your experience. But this is doubly heartbreaking because these officers were Black. They were people who are supposed to understand our experience. They were people who were doing community policing. And I think that this just makes me boil because it just shows once again that we get a kernel of justice. We get the scraps that are left at the table. We get the minimal charge. When will our lives matter at the same level that anyone else's lives matter when you can see point blank evidence on a tape that is irrefutable? And that just breaks my heart to see this happen with all these different names and this chorus of Black lives that frankly just don't matter.
Absolutely. Another name added. Oh yeah, please, Jay, by all means.
Yeah, I did want to add that I think the notion some people are looking at here is that something is better than nothing. But to me, that's not a notion, right? I need it to be the right thing. I need it to be the extreme. And the reason I'm probably a little bit more emotional is because I represent the family of Justin Robinson, the young man in D.C. who was a violence interrupter who was murdered and shot 10 times while sleeping in a vehicle at a McDonald's here. And we can't even, the family and as their council representation, we have not heard anything from anyone in the city. We have not heard any apologies. The mayor's office, my condolences. He actually worked for the Office of Attorney General. So when you see instances like that, I also represent the family of Delano Martin, the 17-year-old who was shot in the back 6 times by Park Police 2 years ago. We have not heard anything from them either. The DOJ, they're opening up investigation. We have not heard anyone get back to us with that. So I think something better than nothing, I don't want to hear that notion. I think long as officers know, hey, they may be able to hold me accountable of something, but not to the extreme, I'll get out of jail or I won't go to jail or I can just go somewhere else, right? After this time is up, I can just and go somewhere else and work for another municipality. Yes. No one would know. That's why something better than nothing, that notion, it does not work.
No question.
It does not work.
Well, and we're going to come back to this again. This DEI approach to Black politics, we don't care if it's a Black mayor, if you can't do anything about it. We're going to come back, Jade and Kwame. The vice president is now taking the stage in Wisconsin. We're going to go immediately to Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States.
Can we hear it for Liz Cheney? It is so good to be back in Wisconsin. I thank you, everyone, for being. Please have a seat. I thank you all for being here. But I have to emphasize that every time I come here, and Liz, I was actually a kid here too when my parents were at the University of Wisconsin, so we have that in common as well. In fact, Tony Evers always says when I land, "Welcome home." But I say all that to say every time that I've come here recently, one of the conversations that we have, all of us together, is how much we love our country, and that really is the binding factor in us all being together and taking the time to be together to really just renew and remind everyone of what is at stake, but born out of love that we have this fight. And I want to thank you, Liz Cheney, for reminding us that regardless of party affiliation, is a factor that binds us all. And so I thank you for your support and your leadership and your courage. I also want to thank all the other great leaders who are with us today. Governor Tony Evers, where is he? Thank you. Mayor Grant, thank you for the warm welcome. I want to thank Senator Tammy Baldwin, who is traveling around the state, but who I know you will re-elect in November. Thank you, Sheriff Mitchell, for your support and your life of service to the people of Iowa County. And so I do want to say a bit more about Liz Cheney. You all know her leadership, and she has obviously and so importantly been a leader for the people of Wyoming, but she has also been an extraordinary national leader and has served with great honor. And she not only, as she has talked today, recognizes that character is among the most important attributes of leadership, but she also personifies that attribute. And she possesses some of the qualities of character that I most respect in any individual and any leader. Courage, especially at a moment like this, where there are so many powerful forces that have been intent on trying to demean and belittle and make people afraid. And there are many who know it is wrong, and then there are those who have the courage to speak out loudly about it and the conviction to speak truth. And, you know, it is so admirable when anyone does it, and especially when it is difficult to do in an environment such as this. But Liz Cheney really is a leader who puts country above party and above self, a true patriot, and it is my profound honor to have your support. And I also want to thank your father, Vice President Dick Cheney, for his support and what he has done to serve our country. Every endorsement matters, and this endorsement matters a great deal, Liz, and it carries a special significance because, as you said, we may not see eye to eye on every issue, and we are going to get back to a healthy two-party system, I am sure of that, where we will have vigorous debates. And as you said, you may not have supported a Democrat for president before, but as you have also said, we both love our country and we revere our democratic ideals. And we both also believe in the nobility of public service. And we know that our oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America is a sacred oath, an oath that must be honored and must never be violated. And your words today and the reason we are all here today, I think really do underscore perhaps one of the most fundamental questions that is facing the American people in this election. Who will obey that oath? Who will abide by the oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America? I have had the privilege. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution 6 times in my career, including as vice president, as a United States senator, and as the top law enforcement officer of the largest state in our country. responsible for upholding and enforcing the laws of the state and the laws of the United States was the work I did. And I have never wavered in upholding that oath. And I have always executed it faithfully and without reservation. And therein lies the profound difference between Donald Trump and me. He, who violated the oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And make no mistake, he who, if given the chance, would violate it again. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. And as you have heard and know, he refused to accept the will of the people and the results of an election that was free and fair. As you have heard, he sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted law enforcement officers. He threatened the life of his own vice president and refused to engage in the peaceful transfer of power. And let us be clear about how he intends to use power if elected again. He has called for jailing journalists, political opponents, anyone he sees and deems as being an enemy. He has pledged to destroy the independence of the Department of Justice. And he called for deploying our active duty military against our own citizens. Well, I believe you and my running mates both. Well, listen, I believe that anyone who recklessly tramples on our democratic values, as Donald Trump has, anyone who has actively and violently obstructed the will of the people and the peaceful transfer of power, as Donald Trump has, anyone who has called for, I quote, termination of the Constitution of the United States, as Donald Trump has, must never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again. And the tragic truth that we are facing in this election for President of the United States is that there is actually an honest question about whether one of the candidates will uphold the oath to the Constitution of the United States. That is the tragic truth of this election, that this is actually an honest question that we are having as Americans. And I know the vast majority of us agree that upholding the Constitution must be a basic requirement we expect of anyone seeking the highest office in the land. I know the vast majority of us, regardless of your political party, agree we must hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power. And if you share that view, no matter your political party, there is a place for you with us and in this campaign, because those principles, I know, unite us across party lines. And in this election, I take seriously my pledge to be a president for all Americans, My entire career, I've only had one client, the people. And when I say that, I mean all the people, not just those who share my party affiliation. Through all my decades in law enforcement, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only question I ever asked was, are you okay? And that is the kind of president we deserve, and I pledge to you that is the kind of president I will be. Because the President of the United States must not look at our country through the narrow lens of ideology or petty partisanship or self-interest. The President of the United States must not look at our country as an instrument for their own ambitions. Our nation is not some spoil to be won. The United States of America is the greatest idea humanity ever devised. The nation that inspired the world to believe in the possibilities of a representative government. And so, in the face of those who would endanger our magnificent experiment, people of every party must stand together. And let me be clear, democracy and freedom are not only at stake here at home, they are also at stake around the world. As President of the United States, I will strengthen, not abdicate, America's global leadership. Last week, I met with Ukraine's President Zelensky. And the message I delivered was the same message I've shared with him every time I've seen him. I stand with Ukraine, and I always will. And I told him, as I have before, I want Ukraine to prevail. By contrast, in our debate, Donald Trump couldn't even bring himself to say he wanted Ukraine to win the war. Couldn't even bring himself to say that. A war that Putin, a brutal dictator, launched against a free and independent people. Trump wants to force Ukraine to give up its sovereign territory, a bedrock principle upon which we stand and fight for. And you know who else wants them to give up their sovereign? Absolutely, territory? Putin. Putin. And that's not a plan for peace. It's a plan for surrender. Well, I believe that in the global struggle between tyranny and democracy, the President of the United States must always be on the side of freedom. So we are gathered here today in Ripon, not far, as the Congresswoman mentioned, from a small building where the Republican Party was born in 1854. Liz Cheney stands in the finest tradition of its leaders. And if people across Wisconsin and our nation are willing to do what Liz is doing, to stand up for the rule of law, for our democratic ideals, and the Constitution of the United States, then together I know we can chart a new way forward, not as members of any one party, but as Americans. Americans who are united in our devotion to the country we love. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you all. Thank you.
Well, there we have it. The Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, with Liz Cheney, former Congresswoman from Wyoming, ironically standing over the Vice President's left shoulder, to the left of President Harris, although we were looking at her and she was to our right, hitting some major themes there. Defense of the Constitution, defense of active duty military, standing with the, and saying that no one who would violate the Constitution should ever stand again behind the seal of the President of the United States, saying there should be a president for all Americans, talking about our magnificent experience and defending democracy and freedom, not just in the United States, but abroad, with interesting choice there, standing with Ukraine, but not one mention of the regional war that the killers of the Israeli Defense Force have expanded even as we speak. Praising Liz Cheney for standing in the finest of the GOP tradition. It sounds like something that Byron Donalds or Wesley Hunt or some of those blackface MAGA boys might say. That's something I'm very familiar. You heard Mike Steele used to say back in the day before he saw the light and backed away from the ledge that those two brothers have jumped over with both feet. Talked about peaceful transfer of power, free and fair elections, check your voter registration early. Voting has already started. So much to unpack there and so many convergences there. Kwame, brother, I mean, as a person who has been involved in politics for so long and has seen a lot of this stuff up close, I mean, Liz Cheney standing over Kamala Harris's left shoulder, and she gives a speech that, as you said, is claiming that P word. What do you make of the speech that we just heard from the Vice President of the United States in that battleground state?
Well, Dr. Carr, I'm choking up on the bat, and I'm watching that baseball come down, and I'm going to try to take my swing at it and hit it out the park.
Yes, sir.
It is a lot right now. There's a curveball coming in at about 90 miles an hour.
Yes, sir.
I think that the way you framed it speaks a lot to the optics, right? Let's talk about the stagecraft and the optics of this announcement. It actually reminded me of something. I was taking notes all during this. The fact that that is the birthplace of the Republican Party in 1854 in Ripon, Wisconsin, that is a sort of a homegoing. It is a homecoming of sorts for the Republican Party. So they're trying to basically say, we want to have that homecoming, but we also want a refresh. We want a reset, and we want to reclaim our brand. So they're doing that in the center of where they started. And it actually reminded me of the stagecraft and the brilliant optics behind President Obama launching his campaign at the birthplace of Lincoln way back, many, many years ago. And so seeing that same stagecraft and the importance and the nuance and the kind of brilliance of the cinematography around it really shows you that the Republican Party is trying to reset, and Vice President Harris is trying to claim as many people in that bucket as they reset as she can to possibly come over to her side for this election. So I think the choice of Ripon, Wisconsin, I was wondering where that was, why that was important. We all know Wisconsin's a swing state, but the fact that it's a homegoing, a reset, a refresh for the Republican Party, I think is very powerful in terms of the message they sent forward.
Yeah, brother, I tell you, it's definitely a reset for part of the Republican Party, but it seems like the cancer that is MAGA has metastasized and claimed a great deal of that party. Jade, before the Vice President took the stage, you had led us through a litany, and I'm glad that you mentioned those D.C. cases, even as a black mayor sits here in Washington, D.C., doing nothing. when it comes to our people, at least as it relates to state violence against black bodies. And as Kwame mentioned, Gwen Carr, I remember when she came to Howard and talked about her son. At that time, I think there was really a beginning, sadly, of this Mothers of the Movement work. Sabrina Fulton, of course, who we remember from Trayvon Martin's mother, and Tracy Martin Sr., Leslie McSpadden, Mike Brown's mother, and Mike Brown Sr., Rovon Wells, we just heard from, which of course led you into the conversation that we had with Rodney Wells by her side, Brother Nichols' father. As you were talking, Jade, though, through this question of having to defend black folk who seem defenseless against state violence, the police, listening to the vice president there in this volatile time when that part of the Republican Party that has not backed away from the open racism and the support for state violence. In fact, doubling and quadrupling down on it, as we saw Donald Trump talking crazy about black people in Springfield, Ohio. How do you make sense of what we've seen? And in this kind of, I guess it's kind of a safe move for the vice president. I mean, to claim patriotism as such. But how are black people, people undecided, how are the black people being misled by misinformation, particularly younger voters? Some of these cats are saying, I don't care what she says. Can you save us from the police? You ain't talking about that. How are we going to talk to them? What would you say to young people looking at that, or anyone looking at that and saying, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not saluting the flag, and I don't give a damn about and you can't stop the policeman, and I got a mayor who won't do anything for me now, so why in the hell would I vote for you? I hate to ask you that question, Jay, but I mean, how would you work through what we just saw today, and where does that fit in terms of this very close election and those who might still be like, I might sit this one out because I don't see how this helps me in my life?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the viewers who look similar to us, I think a lot of them are like, what about me? Or where do I fit in at that? Or like you said, what relevance is that to me? And I did note that the audience, they look like Cheney. They really did. They looked like they were in Wisconsin. So I did not see much representation on that stage, and I would have liked, I think it was a lost and a missed opportunity for her to say some of the things that she was going to work on for particular communities. It doesn't just have to be African Americans, right? It could be those in the underrepresented communities or ones who are targeted particularly by violence and law enforcement violence. I just think it was like, what does this have to do with me? What am I going to get from this? And I do like that she talked about character, because the first thing that came to my head